Alright, Trekkers and Trekkers, time for the final episode review of the day, which is Necessary Evil. On Bajor, a lavishly dressed Bajoran woman named Patrick Polaris stands next to her window on a dark and stormy night. Quark is seated on a nearby couch as the two of them reminisce about the Cardassian occupation. The woman reiterates that she did not kill her husband, although Constable Odo was convinced she did. It is clear Quark does not entirely believe the woman's claim, but he does not care. She asks the Ferengi to retrieve a box, the contents of which are not revealed, in her husband's former shop aboard what is now Deep Space Nine. Assuring her it will take a day or two at most, Quark leaves. After he is gone, a Bajoran man steps out of the shadows. On DS9, as Odo goes about his daily routine, he commences recording a log. Commence station security log, stardate 47282.5. At the request of Commander Sisko, I will hereafter be recording a daily log of law enforcement affairs. The reason for this exercise is beyond my comprehension, except perhaps that humans have a compulsion to keep records and lists and files. So many, in fact, that they have to invent new ways to store them microscopically. Otherwise, their records would overrun all known civilization. My very inadequate memory would not be good enough for Starfleet. I am pleased to put my voice to this official record of this day. Everything's under control. And log. Later that evening, Quark and Rom approached the former chemist shop, now a storage area, cautiously in the darkened promenade. Quark says he could break through the lock in 25 seconds, but Rom was able to do it in 10. He has used a de-sealing rod to break into the store at Quark's on occasion while Quark was away. Although Quark accuses his brother of being a thief, Rom denies it. Once they are inside, Rom reveals that he has magnesite drop, which can instantly burn off the wall panel. Rom has had to use them to open Quark's latinum floor vault to store extra profits on good business days. Rom has been hoping that his ingenuity would finally earn his brother's trust, but the older Ferengi never tells him to touch anything in the bar again. Quark takes out a small box from behind the wall panel, and he and Rom take it back to the bar. There, Quark opens it to reveal a list of 8 Bajoran names. Curious to find out what they are, he tells Rom to fetch an imager before he reseals the box. However, while Rom is gone, the Bajoran man who was with Quark's employer emerges from the shadows, armed. The Ferengi immediately knows who sent the other man. The mutual employer knew Quark could not resist taking a peek. The man shoots Quark with a compressed tetrion beam and takes off with the list. Rom then comes back with the imager, sees the brother lying on the ground, and starts screaming for help. Dr. Bashir is now kneeling over Quark's unconscious body, attempting to resuscitate him, as Odo, Commander Sisko, Major Kira look on nearby. Quark is immediately taken to the infirmary, and Kira goes off to secure outgoing vessels as Sisko and Odo turn their attention to Rom. While the younger Ferengi seems upset by the apparent loss of his brother, Odo suspects Rom killing Quark for ownership of the bar. Rom isn't able to conceal his elation at the thought of finally getting his brother's bar, but then realizes that quickly makes him a suspect. Sisko, apparently playing good cop, speaks up in Rom's defense, saying that his son is good friends with Sisko's, and asks Rom, as a friend, to share anything he knows that might be helpful. Rom comes across with the truth about the list and Quark's mysterious employer on Bajor. Rom then leads Odo to the ship's door, mentioning that the list was hidden during the occupation, where the room was the chemist's shop. Odo looks at him sharply as he flashes back 5 years as the doors open. Odo, dressed in a nondescript civilian outfit, enters the chemist's shop, where Dukat, the prefect of Bajor and the commander of Terok Nor, is seated behind a desk in someone else's office, in complete control and enjoying it. Dukat introduces himself to Odo and says that the owner of the shop, Vatrick, has been found murdered. The standard Cardassian form of justice in such an event is to execute 10 random Bajorans as an example to the real murderer. But Dukat, claiming he prefers to be more merciful on this occasion, would rather find the real murderer. Odo has something of a reputation for integrity and is known for breaking up disputes between the Bajorans, so Dukat asks him to conduct the inquiry, since Bajoran witnesses and suspects are hardly likely to be open to a Cardassian officer. Odo was at first resistant to the idea of working for the Cardassians, but agrees for the sake of justice, finding the guilty party is preferable to decimating 10 innocent Bajorans. Dukat introduces Odo to the prime witness, the victim's wife, Palra, who hasn't shed a tear since her husband was murdered. Palra says right away that she knows who killed her husband, a young woman with whom he was having an affair. The woman is still in the station, and she points out a young Kira having a solitary meal on the promenade. The flashback ends as Kira approaches Odo. The attempt on Quark's life and the mention of the list has brought Vatric's murder to both their minds. In his office, Odo is attempting to get Rom's mind off of his possibly becoming owner of his brother's bar. The two of them reviewed the events of the night before in an attempt to jog Rom's memory. Although the Ferengi is unable to remember any of the complete names, he believes the first one started with Chesso. Odo gives the name to Kira, who goes to investigate as Odo enters another flashback. Odo approaches seated Kira in an attempt to seem casual. However, his behavior and lack of experience makes it all too obvious that he is a security officer. Kira denies having had an affair with Vatric. In fact, she was transferred to the station from the service after hitting a supervisor who made sexual advances towards her. When Odo asks her for an alibi, Kira says she was in the bar, trying to find work. Odo was a little frustrated at her reticence, and insists that he is not on anyone's side, especially not Dukat's. She rejoins that he will have to pick a side, Cardassian over Bajoran eventually. On Bajor, Odo interviews Mrs. Vatric in her home, which, in sharp contrast to the time of Quark's visit, is so brightly lit and sumptuously decorated. She claims to be ignorant of any list, or of the attempt on Quark's life. Odo asks whether the name Chesso means anything to her, and she says no. As he is leaving, he compliments her on the elegance of her home, then mentions that records show her power had recently been cut off for lack of payments, yet now she is living well again. With a smile, she states that she has received gifts of money from an acquaintance whose identity she can't reveal. Odo leaves, and a distressed look crosses her face. Dr. Bashir is unsure if Quark will live. Major Kira stops by the infirmary to tell Odo that she thinks she has identified the Chesso he is looking for. A mining engineer named Cesaro Cito, who traveled to the station frequently during their occupation and has since been very active for charities benefiting Bajoran war orphans. The bad news is Cesaro is dead. He drowned in a pond at his home the night before. Odo realizes that Mrs. Vatric had Cesaro killed as soon as he mentioned the name Chesso to her. Realizing that Mrs. Vatric knows from him that Quark is still alive, he stations a security guard in the infirmary around the clock. Looking at the still unconscious Quark, Odo enters another flashback. As he enters Quark's and finds the Ferengi, Odo once again tries to be casual and discreet, and once again is unable to hide his role and connection to Dukat. When Odo asks him to confirm Kira's alibi, Quark insinuates that Kira was performing a sexual favor for him the night before, as an added incentive for him to hire her. But from what he had gathered earlier, Odo knows Kira would not do this. Confronted with the truth, Quark admits that Kira paid him to provide her with an alibi. Odo finds Commander Sisko and Lieutenant Dax sitting at a table in Quark's, informs them that he has reconstructed the list from Mrs. Vatric's communications logs and bank records. 8 people, who had no previous contact with her, so began talking to her extensively after the list was stolen, and each of them has transferred 100,000 Bajoran litas into her bank account. The 3 of them reached the same conclusion. The men on the list were collaborating with the Cardassians during the occupation and emerged from the occupation very rich men. With the list, Mrs. Vatric has been blackmailing them. Odo admits that he doesn't have enough evidence to charge her with a crime, but he gets permission from Sisko to bring her from Bajor to the station and for questioning. Meanwhile, the man who earlier tried to kill Quark looks on intently and follows Odo out of the bar. In his office, Odo flashes back again. In the security office, Kira admits that she lied about her alibi but swears she didn't kill Vatric. Odo demands to know where she was then, and she admits that she is a member of the Bajoran Underground and was part of a team that planted a bomb in the ore processing section of the station. She begs him not to expose her, saying that she'll be executed by the Cardassians. Just then, Dukat appears, demanding to know whether or not Kira is guilty. Realizing that he has to choose a side, Odo does not expose Kira, but still informs Dukat that he is satisfied she did not commit the murder, and she is free to go. Dukat grabs her by the arm and warns Odo about lying of her involvement, in Vatrik's murder. Odo responds by telling Dukat that if he knows as much about him as he says he does, Dukat should know that he never lies. Dukat releases his hand from Kira, and she leaves. Mrs. Vatrik's assassin enters the infirmary with a bouquet of flowers and uses them as a cover to stab the guard Odo has posted there in his chest. Approaching Quark's body, he tears off the Ferengi's life support monitor and then starts to smother him with a pillow. Rom enters the room, and, seeing the attempted murder of his brother, begins screaming at the top of his lungs. The assassin throws Rom aside and tries to run, but is stopped at the door to the infirmary by Odo and his deputies. Odo restrains the assassin and summons Bashir to the infirmary. Rom is still screaming, but Odo tells him he can stop. He has heroically saved his brother's life. Rom appears pleased for a moment, only to realize he has now lost possession of the bar, causing him to start screaming again. On the infirmary bed, Quark has just regained consciousness, gives a small but triumphant smile. In the brig, Mrs. Vatrik is brought to view the assassin, a calming stage that she's never seen him before. Odo and Kira say that their communications records and bank transfer statements tell a different story. Vatrik says she wants her advocate, and Odo locks her in a cell next to the assassins while she is waiting. Mrs. Vatrik defiantly says that no matter what else Odo thinks she may have done, she didn't kill her husband, and Odo can't prove that she did. To Kira's surprise, Odo replies, "I know." Outside of the security office, Odo confronts Kira with what he has figured out. Vatrik himself must have been a collaborator, or else he wouldn't have had illicit names hidden in his office. Dukat could not risk exposing his other contacts on Bajor by investigating Vatrik's murder himself, which is why he recruited Odo to do it. Also knows that Vatrik's wife wouldn't have killed him, since he was the one keeping her in luxury. All this means that the people with the strongest reason to want him dead would have been the underground. Kira admits that another resistance fighter sabotaged the ore processor while she was into Vatrik's shop. She was summoned to kill him, but to find the list, knowing that Vatrik was Dukat's liaison with his network of collaborators. She observed his shop when Vatrik surprised her, forcing her to kill him. Odo asked her why she didn't tell him the truth. Even after Cardassians left, it became clear that he was not working for them. Kira says he couldn't bring herself to tell him the truth, for fear it would create a schism between them. He tells her that this incident may not affect their friendship, but Kira asks him if he'll ever be able to trust her in the same way again. Odo can find no answer. Aww. So anyway, let's take a look at some background information with this episode, beginning with the production. A scene was delayed from the third act that revealed that Apollo was having an affair with Dukat. Michael Piller thought cutting that scene was a mistake. Piller commented, quote, "The greatest regret I have about that show was that I allowed Rick Berman to take on one scene that would have really made it better. That was the scene where Odo, just having talked to Kira, was going to see Apollo and he sees Dukat coming out of her room and he kisses her goodbye, indicating that they had just had sex. When Dukat walks away, we go around the corner where Odo was, and now there is a picture that is crooked. Dukat straightens it out and walks on, and then Odo goes to see Palra. If we left that in, that would suggest that Gold Dukat, a red herring, would have also been involved in the murder and was involved in covering it up, somehow. That would have been an interesting additional element for people to be thinking about during the course of the show. I've never been as sorry about cutting something out as I felt about that." Mark Alima was irked that the scene where he kisses Catherine Moffat was cut. Alima commented, quote, "Dukat was so taken with Palra. There was a scene where he walks to her door and they kiss, but they cut it. I suppose they didn't want Dukat looking soft or something. I'm not so sure about that." Anyway, now let's take a look at some trivia surrounding this episode. This episode, with its first-person narration, hard-hitting detective main character, flashbacks to a time of war, and overall noir feel, echoes strongly the classic detective fiction of the 40s. Moreover, Rom's interrogation by Odo and Sisko shows the police tactic, also known as good cop, bad cop, because Odo is aggressive toward the Ferengi and tries to threaten him, while Sisko is more supportive and shows sympathy for Rom. This technique is often used by police characters in movies and TV shows. A photo of special effects designer Dan Curry was used on the pad showing Cesaro Cito. The Season 5 episode Things Past acts as a companion piece of sorts to this episode, revealing a dark mistake Odo had made during the occupation that he kept a secret from Kira and the others. This is the only episode of the series in which we hear Odo narrate a log, which he does several times. It was seen from the Ascent, in which he records what he believes to be his final entry on his communicator, that he kept up the tradition. However, we don't hear him recording logs in the traditional sense of captain's log entries outside of these two episodes. This is the first episode where we learn that Rom may be a lot smarter than most people think, that he is in fact possessed of a great deal of mechanical/technical knowledge and expertise. Rom references the time Quark stayed in the Gamma Quadrant overnight, which occurred in the previous episode, Rules of Acquisition. When Odo's questioning Vatrik Palra, he goes to leave the room, stops, turns and says, "One more thing," before asking another question. He also says the phrase, "Oh, part of a routine investigation." Both phrases are homage to the show Columbo, numerous episodes of which were written by Peter Allen Fields, although uncredited. In this episode, we see Odo meet Gul Dukat, Kira Nerys, and Quark for the first time. Chronologically, in the Star Trek timeline, Kira, as part of the Bajoran Resistance, is the first person to call Odo Constable. The line of dialogue is, "Everyone has to choose sides, Constable." Reference Rules of Acquisition number 139. Wives serve, brothers inherit. Colm Meaney and Kira Golovkin do not appear in this episode. Now finally, let's look at some apocrypha about this episode. The Star Trek Terek Nor novel Dawn of the Eagles depicts Kira killing Vatrik, whose given name was revealed as Drasa. It goes into further detail regarding Odo's investigation into the murder and its immediate aftermath. As depicted in the subsequent episode, Wrongs Darker Than Death or Night, Dukat began an affair with Kira's late mother, Kira Maru, in 2346, and following her death in 2353, he attempted to track the movements of her children as best he could. Consequently, he was sure that Kira was not only responsible for Vatrik's death, but that she was a member of the Shakar resistance cell. However, he had his personal aide Basso Tromag obstruct Odo's investigation to prevent him from learning the truth. Nevertheless, Odo took sympathy on Kira and arranged for her to be transported back to the Dakur province of Bajor the following week with the assistance of his deputy Dallin Russell, who was secretly a member of the Karsistans dissident movement, supposedly on Dukat's authority. Basso learned of their plan and arranged passage on the same transport. When ordered the pilot to return the transport to Terek Nor, Kira Russell Basso's face from him and killed him. When not related to the murder investigation, the novel also revealed that Morin arrived on the station during the events of this episode, specifically the day after Odo began the investigation, and almost immediately sat down in what became his regular spot in Quark's. Although Morin would ultimately become his best customer, Quark was initially reluctant to serve him as he regarded Lurians as bad for business. Well, that's kind of rude. So overall, I think this episode is pretty darn good, and I do like the flashbacks showing Odo's time on the stage back when it's called Terek Nor, so yeah. So overall, I give the episode Necessary Evil 4 warp cores out of 5. Well, anyway, tune in tomorrow as we take a look at the episode Second Sight. So, until then, live long and prosper, everybody.